Well, welcome to the West Coast Podcast, featuring me, your host, Kyle Bruehl, and that comes as kind of a shock to all of you. It's actually I am the host of I Know Movies and You Don't, and I am a dear friend. Well, at least I like to think so. A dear friend of the West Coast Podcast, and I am here today to kind of give an introduction to what I do, but also with the confines of what West Coast Podcast does, and they are wrestling podcast or popcast, if you will. And we were all talking. Zach and I were talking about a documentary that came out. It was on my radar. It was David. You Cannot Kill David Arquette, or what I like to call David Arquette colon midlife crisis. And so we are going to be talking about that film today. And I really wanted to kind of take the moment before we went in, because if anybody knows my show, I am very verbose. I do long openings, and you will have to either enjoy the luxury sounds of my voice, or you can turn it off, and that's the risk that we all take at this point. But with my history with wrestling is actually very minimal. It's a very particular time in my life. I grew up with basically the Attitude Era. I remember vast experiences watching the Dudley Boys, Hardy Boys, Edge and Christian in tables, ladders, chairs. I remember The Rock going with Stone, after Stone Cold Steve Austin. These are my memories and histories with wrestling. And with that in mind, actually David Arquette comes into play, and not through what the dramatic catalyst is for the film in general, and what they set up as one of the most what is deemed a betrayal in storytelling, a betrayal in action in WCW history, with David Arquette winning the World Championship as sort of a publicity stunt. And the movie kind of sets this up as the original sin of David Arquette, and that's not what he intended on a personal level. He grew up loving wrestling. His father did a voice on for a cartoon wrestler, and as the movie surveys, and then he David Arquette loves wrestling, wanted to be a fan. He went to multiple matches, and we even took his befuddled wife at the time, Courtney Cox. He's a kid at heart and loves this kind of stuff. So that betrayal is something that you can tell within the confines of the film weighs heavy on him. And so the film almost acts as sort of a penance, a penance through pain, through fire, through training, to kind of earn the respect, earn his laurels as being a respectable wrestler, putting himself through the ring and the ringer. And there's something laudable, there's something respectable and admirable about that. And throughout the time, I just kept asking myself, can you believe a nonfiction film about an actor who has always come to a degree and approached his career like an extended piece of performance art? Is this real, what you're seeing? Is his admirable qualities real? Is what he wants to do in this film respectable enough, or is he actually doing it? And to a degree, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's real. It doesn't matter if it's true. Because there will always be shades of truth within those kinds of performances, and cinema and wrestling kind of share that same liminal space of fictition and reality, the blending of both. And that's why I think it's a wonderful movie to talk about within my background in film, with West Coast Popcat's background in wrestling. And I'm being joined today by the three gentlemen that I'm sure you all love, and I'm going to introduce them, get their first introductions and reactions about the film. First, Mr. Zach Protzman, welcome to your own show. And,
oh man!
And You Cannot Kill David Arquette. What did you think of the film as somebody who comes with a background of both film and wrestling?
I liked it way more than I thought I was going to. I thought it was just going to be kind of a basic documentary. Documentaries all kind of run the same routine. This one, included something that I don't think a lot of films in general include enough of, and that's heart. Um, you see like how the wrestler was, and that's kind of a lot of the documentaries with wrestling. It's the dark side of the ring kind of stuff. This one, it did show love, it did show excitement, it did show how you kind of go through the system a little bit and train, which was good. I thought it succeeded.
Very well. I mean, yeah, heart, I think, comes really, really at the forefront of it. I would agree with you, because Arquette, he's kind of he's a genial clown. I mean, he's a kid at heart, as I said. And to watch him, I mean, he's a hard person to dislike. I think he's got a touch of smarm. He's a wannabe kid. You almost can't necessarily fault him for this kind of act of opportunism or like tabloid infamy, and it's ingrained with something that's deeply felt. And he, like I said, it's hard to say whether everything you're seeing is real or if it's orchestrated, but again, those kind of things blend together, and I think the heart is undeniably real. So I agree with you.
Yeah.
Also being joined, someone else who has been on my show, I am also taking over his, because I'm taking over all of theirs. This is just my time. I have come and really usurped the entire process. But
Please do.
Mr. Eric Skippings, how are you, sir?
I'm doing a-okay. I just woke up from a nappy and I'm ready to talk about David Arquette.
Well, ironically, I just woke up from a nap myself. I needed to just disappear into a calm before I spoke at long length. But Eric, I know you have a background in wrestling. It's something you actually do. It's something you are ingrained in physically, mentally, emotionally. But we've talked film, and so I wanted to get your kind of initial take on the film. And David Arquette, if you have any history with that storyline, if you have any history with and how it relates to your love of film in general.
Well, first of all, I'm just going to say that is the coolest introduction to being a wrestling fan I've ever heard. So I'm going to steal that. But Noc and I pretty much have identical, what's what I'm looking for? Identical, I guess, trails when it comes to David Arquette and his journey. But when it comes to the film, I have to admit, they taught me things about him I did not know. As I'm going to reference a lot during this, I released a video where I mentioned Arquette's revitalized career in this second try to redeem himself. And I had no idea how much he went through. I give this documentary credit for actually educating me.
Yeah. It puts you through a step-by-step process. And even though there are shades of the heart that Zach talked about, there are also shades of immense sadness. I mean, the process that he's putting himself through, the pain, just like shots of him at like a motel signing, he's not signing any pictures because there's nobody in his line. And you're like, I understand that, a lot of people have this kind of barrier to listen to stories about, they're like, David Arquette has a lot of money. What does he have to complain about? What does he have to? And, I think that misses the point. A lot of people tell you that wealth doesn't necessarily bring happiness. So you have to take that into consideration. Like David Arquette's wealth, his family brings him happiness, but there's something in a void in him, that wealth is not, sustaining. And so it's in the back of his mind. They do that brain scan. They show you that his brain is operating on a different level than other people's, that he has immense anxiety, that he's struggled to become sober and gone through that kind of sadness. That I think that's integral to making him the underdog in this documentary, the underdog. And I think we all love underdog stories, and we want to see somebody succeed, kind of have redemption, whether it's personal, whether it's physical. It's all in line with that kind of story. So I agree.
Yeah.
And first time on my show.
Oh, man.
But there are so many slots. In fact, he's going to get a message from me in about a week, because we're about to go on a deep dive for my first Patreon led season on James Bond, and he's already assigned to one, I think maybe two, so he's already going to get an email from me. He's going to be officially on the show, and we've put him on some horror, I believe, based off an email he sent. But Mr. Noc Burnett, how are you, sir?
I'm good, man. I'm known as the final boss to some. I'm ready for the 007 movies, man. I can't wait. I really enjoyed this movie, and I want to take it back to what you just said about the wealth thing. Being like, especially in this pandemic now, having all this time, like the purpose is really matters. Like you have all this time, but if you don't have that purpose to do something, like you'd be kind of wasting your days. And even with all that wealth he had, he didn't have that purpose or like that fulfillment from what he was passionate about. And I really saw that in this movie. You really saw the sadness. It was just so many different levels, and I really enjoyed getting to see this closer look. I didn't grow up on watching him in WCW. I just heard all the stories and of how he betrayed and all this stuff he did to the wrestling community. My first match I saw him was the match against RJ City later on in the movie, which I thought, wow, this dude's actually doing stuff. I didn't know he did the Mexico stuff. The guy he trained with later on in the video, Peter Avalon, me and Eric both trained with him also, and I can vouch the guy knows he's doing. So that was a great person for him to get with, to get right. He's really technical in what he does and his approach. So that was really cool to see, and I could relate to that. I really enjoyed the movie.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. I really I liked also that part of the training segments versus it just made me laugh, and it maybe made me laugh because of the history of them together, the history of them in WCW and Royal and Ready to Rumble. But when he goes to Diamond Dallas Page and he looks up and goes like, "Why do you want to do this?" And I'm like, dude, that guy is he does not know how to act in this scene.
No. He's just getting that DDP yoga over.
That DDP yoga,
he's
man.
selling. Always be closing, DDP. Noc, what's the temperature in space? Pretty cold?
Yeah, so it's cold, but when you're on a win streak like me.
Ooh, I'll take that.
Is this like on-show drama, like where you're winning?
Exactly.
It's funny because he's absolutely losing, and I'm a champion. But you pretend.
I mean, I'm right in the middle. I feel like I'm a ref and I'm just gonna be like, stop, no, hey, don't do that.
It's just pent up from not training in the ring.
Yeah, missed it, man.
So I guess like a good question then, because on the training, I thought the step by step, it's not mere montage. They really do show a pretty intricate in the ring approach, where he even goes down to Mexico and learns it in Tijuana and does these luchadores, and starts training. And it's a really wonderful sequence. I mean, it's slightly dramatic, slightly hammy, and then slightly technical, and you're like, well, there's wrestling right there. It's right in front of you. It's all on this kind of pageantry display, and they do this kind of street wrestling, and it's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, Mexico is huge for the wrestling culture, man. The luchadors, they're like superheroes over there, and that was really cool to see. That was my favorite part of the movie, honestly, watching all that go down. The backyard wrestling before that, I was like, oh man, they were just trying to take advantage of him at that point. That's how I felt, truly.
Yeah. That's. I mean, there was a point where the big dude is like, you just got your ass beat and you didn't get paid for it. That's the definition of wrestling. And I kind of dislike the fact that the movie never actually goes back to that, because that's not what wrestling is. That's the ugly side of wrestling. That's a side that we don't necessarily need. But it kind of sucks that David had to go through that. But it was a good show for the film, I guess.
That's the one where he goes to the backyard, right?
Yeah.
It's like literally
first time.
beaten. Like he's just beaten to death. They put him through thumbtacks. They smash UV lights, poles on the back of him. I mean,
the ring falling apart.
Yeah, they had to keep resetting the ring. I mean,
I'll let you in on a little secret for that. There are two reasons why you do that in wrestling. One of them is to do something that stands out in your show. Like when Mick Foley did it, it wasn't an every night occurrence, right?
Yeah.
So you remember the matches that happened when he got tossed off the cell.
Sure,
He
absolutely.
had the flaming stick with the barbed wire. The other reason you do it is because you don't know how to wrestle. So
Exactly.
when you have these guys passionately explain how David Arquette was disrespecting their life and their business and all that. If you go back to when backyard wrestling started, kind of around the exact same time, David Arquette, the extreme backyard wrestling, I'll say, started around the time when David Arquette was in WCW. People in wrestling said the same thing about backyard wrestling that these guys said about David Arquette. It was a disrespect to the business and all that kind of stuff. So even when they had a PlayStation 2 backyard wrestling game, which I think ICP was a part of, but I mean, that was, I guess, along the same lines as what they considered David Arquette's title win to be. So it was just kind of, it was the pot calling the kettle black, I guess.
Yeah.
That's very fair. I mean, anything ICP is insulting enough. I like that because it shows kind of a hubris on their part that they're deriding him. Like he's trying to show the act of going to them is not necessarily because that's the only place he has to go. That's a place where he feels like I got to start there. That's where the passion, that's where the appreciation and the kind of not amateur, but like the grassroots quality of wrestling. I need to go there. I need to take my punches. I need to experience this. I need to be part of this. And so again, when the entire movie, again, movies are, if everyone out there doesn't necessarily understand, movies are manipulation. They're pure emotional manipulation. How a scene is lit is meant to engage something within how you associate color, how a movie, how it's shot, where the frame is. It's pure manipulation. And so the movie's operating on that level. I mean, these guys are trained enough in documentary filmmaking to manipulate you, but that sense of emotion and manipulation can't necessarily find its essence unless there's something, how you orchestrate it in a believability. And Arquette is going through these motions, going from the bottom, working his way to what, not the top, but, to a respectable quality where he's fighting. I forget the last guy, but they open up the film with
Mr.
Anderson, yeah. And they keep cutting to him and be like, trash talking Arquette throughout the thing. The movie is kind of a microcosm of a storyline that you'll find in wrestling, but done to a cinematic degree and kind of just and a focus in on this one storyline and distill it into an hour 40 that you'd maybe get over like a between pay-per-views or maybe multiple pay-per-views.
That's actually a hell of a point. I kind of felt that way too, especially with like the pickup this year and cinematic matches going on in wrestling. It did feel like a long drawn out story, like an actual wrestling, like took a storyline and it translated it to a documentary. I did feel that also.
Yeah. Coincidentally enough, I believe the first 3 matches he had with RJ City were part of a storyline. So I wouldn't be surprised if in some way he did try to, form a story for the documentary.
Those were the only set of matches I had watched like on my own before this documentary. And then that Nick Gage one where he had to go to the hospital because that was everywhere. Those headlines that was insane.
I mean, they were showing they showed everyone's reaction from TMZ to I mean, it was in notable news sources where David Arquette had to be, and he had to be hospitalized. They actually had the footage. Like he was when he removed the cloth and he was bleeding out the neck. I was like, okay,
that's no joke. And forgot people who might not know the guy he wrestled, Nick Gage. He's pretty famous in the Indies. He's known as the death match guy. Like those are all his matches. So for him to take on that type of match, I was like, this is not going to be anything pretty. This is going to be insane.
And because of that, there's something deeply psychological that was a little troubling, about Arquette. Not that, anybody, and not to question anybody's validity on when they do that kind of match. Obviously, anybody who wants to take that on, there's a spectacle to it. There's an approach. There's an entertainment value. But he almost wanted to be punished, like he wanted to have pain, and it's almost like you're seeing in how the movie sets up this idea that he wants to be liked, that he wants to be loved either by his father, his grandfather, his siblings, in life, and probably because through an audience. This is a guy who, and they talk about it, he had his start coming up as one of the notable young actors, and he was on that Vanity Fair with Leonardo DiCaprio, Matthew McConaughey, Will Smith. Every single other actor on that magazine went on to be huge stars, except for David Arquette.
Right. That is something that I wish they expanded more into documentary, because after a certain point, his actor story kind of fades away. We focus on the wrestling entirely. But I don't know. I feel like there was more to hear about that, because he did work in those 10 years. Like, he makes it sound like he had absolutely no roles, but he did work.
That's true. There is that leads to a kind of a moment of like what's real and what's not, and he's kind of painting a picture. I mean, if you really get into those words, he says, I've auditioned for 10 years and I haven't got anything. Maybe all the other things that he's gotten, he didn't audition for. And so there's like a hint of truth to that. I mean, I just did recorded an episode for my podcast on a horror film from 2015 called Bone Tomahawk, and David Arquette's in it. And we talked about, he's in the opening of the film, and he's wonderful. He and Sid Haig have an opening in that film that is so... You can see, not only because he's kind of a Western buffoon in it, very typical, typecasted to what his career is, but the tone of the film is almost essential for the rhythms for him to hit those marks in the conversation and reactions in those scenes, and it's pretty phenomenal. And it's actually because it's a cannibal Western. It's a throwback to another one he did in the late 90s called Ravenous with Robert Carlyle and Guy Pearce, and the guy has shades. Whenever he shows up in a serious role like Ravenous or Wild Bill, he's more interesting. And so I feel like he was robbed of his ability to be a very interesting character, and maybe he saw an opportunity, when he got roped into the WCW storyline, to kind of venture something else, another side of him, because when you're constantly playing the buffoon from Scream movies and Never Been Kissed and all these kind of films, like you get the feeling that you're not doing enough. And so, and especially for a guy who's got so much personality, like this really is venturing that side of him in a meaningful way. But I agree, it's mentioned, and it's kind of on the periphery of that psychology that they're venturing. But again, it's very much left wanting a little bit more information.
Because there's definitely a story there on that side, because just something that we were actually talking about last night. I'm honestly jealous of how in Mexico or Japan, if you're a professional wrestler, your status goes up. You are viewed on the same level as like an A-list celebrity. But in America, if you're an actor and you go into wrestling, it's seen as jokey, it's seen as comical, and your career takes a hit. So there's something more to it. I do hope whoever is the next David Arquette, they go into that and try to bring that status up.
I think nowadays it might be a little more of an understanding, but back then, for sure, your career was taking a hit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, gentlemen, I don't want to go too long. I don't want this to be like an over verbose Kyle episode that is traditional on my channel. But I wanted to kind of go around and ask you just some. So I want to kind of a summary, but I also am going to ask you kind of a personal question. So, Noc, with your experience with this film, in your relation to training in wrestling, how did you find the movie respectable in a way to showcase what the work goes into this process? And did you think that Arquette earned your respect based off of this kind of slight in Western, like, to break that mold, to take it to a further, to say the fakery to an extent where it's not believable, where this guy wins the WCW championship? Did you feel this movie, one, honored the process, but also redeemed Arquette based off of the tainted mythology of him.
So I'll even go and say, even before this movie came out, when I was watching some of his stuff in his crumb, he redeemed himself for me in that turn. This only confirmed it even more. I think it honored what it takes to be a wrestler, and it showed different sides of it. I'm glad they showed like the backyard stuff to show there is some of that stuff out there where it's like people think they're taking it seriously, but they're just there to kind of beat you up, and it's not really professional training. And they showed the next stage. And I showed Peter, who will break it down technical. Okay, this is how you do the lockup. This is what you're going to do over here. And showed different styles and took it to Mexico. So I thought seeing all those different layers in the whole world of wrestling was really cool. And that honored it in itself. And he for sure redeemed himself in my eyes.
Cool. And the technical process of wrestling, do you think this is a good introduction for people to kind of see what people go through in order to get the physicality?
I think so too. You see him getting beat up. You see the after effects, all the bruises and welts on him. I think people don't see that. So they just think, oh, you're kind of just pretending. Like you really are getting hit. You really are going through it. It takes a toll on your body. So I'm glad they showed those scenes. I'm glad they showed the scenes of his family with his kids and his wife seeing that. And I'm drawing more towards it. Like at the end, we see his wife and body, Miss Elizabeth. I thought it was really cool to see all that transition. And they set it up well.
Very cool. Eric, just on you're welcome to answer the same kind of questions, but I also was curious based off of just the criticism that there wasn't enough information. Do you feel like this movie gets you interested to learn more about him, or is this enough to know and understand the idea of a redemptive arc, the idea of a story arc within wrestling? And do you think that the movie it honors kind of the mythology and the fictional and also realistic blend of real life and heightened spectacle for David Arquette's personal story, and how that does it mirror your experience on a personal level with wrestling itself?
First, I'll go on and say that I would like to learn more about him. Not enough to watch a whole nother hour and a half documentary, but enough to do some light reading about just to see how the last 10 years treated him. But I will say, I think this, first off, he had my respect the moment he came back, because he didn't have to, unless those demons were haunting him loudly enough that he really felt like he had to. But now he has my admiration, because to do what he did, to go, first of all, go down to Mexico, which is something that I've told myself I'm never going to learn the Mexican style, because they do it the opposite way, the American training. Yes, so that's something that I just know. It's like driving on the opposite side of the road. So I give him credit for learning multiple styles. I think the film did a great job of redeeming him. It's almost as if you're watching a real life wrestling story play out, because we do see, for example, older wrestlers who come back who feels if they can't retire, feels they have to prove something. And David Arquette just did it. There's no bullshit, there's no gimmick, there's no favors. He worked his way back up from the bottom. He literally learned it all. He could have easily walked up to a promotion and said, if you pay me money, I'll show up and do nothing. But he didn't. He went, he's an official wrestler. He's an official brother, if you will.
Yeah. I do like your distinction between respect and admiration, because I think that is a distinct difference. Because you can have one and not the other, but you could also lose both. And I like that the film opens, but here's one fault. I wish they had revisited it. The film almost opens up with the godfather of wrestling is Ric Flair, and they ask him this question: do you respect him as a person? And he said, yeah, no, I like him as a person. And then they were like, how about as a wrestler? And he's like, oh no, I don't respect him as a wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they could have asked him again.
Well, yeah,
they couldn't afford Ric Flair that much, man. Come on, that's a nature boy. You get one seat.
I mean, I feel like that was it. It was like, no, you give me once, and you ask me one question, because it's literally the only thing in the film. But to have that perception, somebody who is nature boy, to deride him and say, no, I don't respect him as a wrestler. And the movie is trying to give you that sort of experience that maybe he does deserve your respect, not only as a wrestler, but maybe your admiration that he did the process. He recognized he cheated. He participated in a cheat. I mean, that was an Andy Kaufman level sham. Like, it was disrespectful in a way to the process, to how you earn yourself in that, and it's not necessarily all his fault. Even some of the guys who ran WCW admit it's like, I don't know who came up with it first, but it was a conversation in the back room.
Yeah.
And I don't think he necessarily, I think he was so excited to be part of it, and he didn't necessarily think about what was going to happen and how it was going to disparage everything. And so I do like that he recognizes that fault, and I really wanted just maybe one little cap end for somebody, as big as Ric Flair to go, I respect that guy. He did it. Like he really went through the process. I think it's just missing that, it has kind of a weird, forceful, emotional touchstone on the end of it with Luke Perry dying, and they were friends. Yeah. But I guess it makes sense because Luke Perry's son is now a wrestler.
Yeah, Jungle Boy.
Yeah, he was in the documentary. He was driving them to the hospital, and he was wrestling at that event too.
Yeah, and so I mean that sort of connection, it comes kind of out of nowhere at the end. Is almost like it happened during filming, and so they kind of rushed to add it on. That's the only feeling I got from a rushed production standpoint. It makes sense, and I'm glad they weaved in that you almost could have set up a little more, or maybe a little more obvious to me, because I wasn't necessarily ingrained in that world or understood all the relationships of everybody. And Zach, did you have any last thoughts and summations about your experience with You Cannot Kill David Arquette?
Yeah, again, just like Eric and Noc, I didn't know he did that much to get back, but it is a lot of especially after it happened, he had people talk about it, but now he has to deal with it with the internet out.
Yeah.
And Twitter. Yeah. And people will go on lists and just name this as the worst, his WCW title reign is the worst thing to ever happen in wrestling. I don't think that is. You will?
That's all I'd see.
I think it's one of the worst things.
I think it is one of the worst, but the worst is the finger point of doom.
Oh, yeah.
Finger poke of doom.
WCW.
Mm-hmm.
Finger point of doom. I don't know if I know that.
Okay. Big match setup between Hogan and Nash, right? They take the NWO. They split them up into two factions.
Yes.
Stupid. So then they have the heads come together. Hogan versus Nash. Nash is the champion. The title is on the line. They get in the ring. The bell hits. Hogan pokes Kevin Nash. Kevin Nash falls. 1, 2, 3. Title changes back to Hogan.
The first troll of the wrestling world.
Oh, man.
What a shit on fans.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa. Was that on
I've been paying money for that.
Was that a pay-per-view too? Like, was that like people paid to watch this entire process? Or was it on the normal broadcast?
It was a pay-per-view.
It's pay-per-view. That's even shittier. That's okay. Yeah. I mean, well, so I was going to ask you guys if you could think of moments that were worse than David Arquette, but I mean that clearly is one.
There was one time in TNA they had this girl. I guess she won like Survivor that year or whatever, and she fought Booker T's wife in a wrestling match on pay-per-view. Both untrained, so you can imagine how that went. Just off the rails from the moment the bell rung. It was terrible.
Oh dear.
Well, I'll give Arquette credit because I was going to ask you, Zach, if you can, because you saw it. I've only seen clips. Didn't Arquette actually try? Like when he got the WC Championship, it wasn't just like dragging along with it. He actually did try to be like a dick with it, be a heel.
Yeah. So as my old ass was eating Brontosaurus burgers in front of me watching this. He did try, and he did the best with what he was given. He was given a storyline by Vince Russo, a little bit from Bischoff too, but DDP sums it up very well in the film. If you're a wrestling fan, you've been watching since you're a kid, and they say, "Hey, tonight we're going to make you the champ," you're probably going to say, "Yeah." He did do his best with it. He did do what he thought was a good heel persona, because in wrestling you want to take something that is real about yourself and just kind of turn that up into ridiculous nature. But he did. I don't know if Kyle, if you saw any of that. They showed a little bit of it in the film.
Sure, they did. Yeah. Yeah, the 12-day reign, they said. He was 12 days as champion. And I saw, it really was kind of a blend. And they almost talk about, they almost set it up that it was him, that blend of something that was true, Mr. Hollywood, and bringing it into and acting as a foil, acting as a heel. And then Hollywood saw that and was like, that's too much. We're not going to really accept you anymore. And then on the other end, the wrestling people were like, wait, no, that's not believable in the extent of this universe and how you earn your laurels. So he was left in limbo.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's of course how the film sets it up. That is, of course, the dramatic crutch and the direction of the film. And, I think the movie, the directors and cinematographers, Price James, David Darg, I think they handle that very well. I think they find a right balance of the mood tone that is needed for redemptive story in wrestling, and use that to guide their film. And I think you get a very good outcome for it. I think it's very heartfelt. It blurs the line from fiction and reality, and appropriately so. And if you are a fan of wrestling, I think it really does an honorable and respectable tradition in showing that process and what you want to be a part of, and how Arquette wants to be part of it. And yeah, there's layers of sadness to it too. And you have to ask yourself, is it worth it in the end? Does he get, in that last moment? For me, this is maybe my final question. Do you think maybe in his mind he did it? Like he has he's found redemption. He is a fulfilled kind of human being. But is that the end of the story? And will David Arquette find loneliness and dissatisfaction again? I'm a cynic, and I see this process that if he is not continuing to do something and churning and having a purpose or direction, that he will be lost again. And it's very possible, considering the ebbs and flows of career, that will happen to him. And I get the arching ambiguity of sadness at the end. And I was going to ask you guys if you feel the same.
I completely agree. Even after the death match, and that wasn't even his last, that was before Ken Anderson. His wife was talking about how he's kind of slipped and going back downhill. And it sounds like wrestling's good for him. It gave him some kind of structure. It gave him physical training, mental training, and it kept him stable. I don't know if he's going to keep doing it, but he needs to find something that can keep him on the path. And I hope he has found something, because if not, then you're right. He is going to go back down into the depression and the drinking.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of felt that way after the death match also, but I thought that was also attributed to him losing his friend, right, in that same area.
Sure.
Well, yeah, that's true, yeah.
But I don't think he's done, honestly. I could see him showing up in some other places and doing some things. AEW right now is kind of taking the TNT brand and not redoing, but taking some of their WCW stars from that area and giving them a better send-off, giving them a better time. Like you have a lot of legends there. I can see Arquette showing up there, to be honest, especially with all the connections he has with like Peter being there and a few other guys.
Yeah, Jungle Boy and all that.
Yeah, Jungle Boy.
If he does, then that would be great. My only fear is that it would be temporary. So
yeah, I don't think it has to be something long. It'd be a temporary thing. And honestly, if he was to do that, this is where I think it goes back to me saying he's redeemed himself. I would be up for that. It'd be cool to see him come back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think he has redeemed himself. I think he does need to constantly be doing something. Scream 5 is coming out, so obviously that was something, and there may be one or two more. So hopefully he's a part of that. Just if for nothing else, if you don't like the character for that reason alone. But yeah, redemption is, I think, especially doing this with his family and his wife coming out as Miss Elizabeth, I think in his heart of hearts, he should, without a doubt, feel redeemed. I don't think anybody's opinion matters anymore about the WCW thing. Everyone knows it was written as a storyline, and also the way he did it, how you guys pointed out, he didn't have to go that low and do those
No.
things. You know, he
No.
worked at like a comic coming back and doing open mics again before demanding like a Netflix special. He was really
Right.
respectful to the business because you know, as storyline as it kind of was to make the documentary, he still did it. He
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
did all this stuff. He still put his body through hell. And I don't know. For me, for someone who watched it live and saw the 2-week reign, which should have just been a night reign and then given to someone like Booker T or something, that would have redeemed him back then. But Russo's kind of a fucking idiot and doesn't know how to write. For me, watching it then, this just puts him at another level. And I would love to see him have one great match, him come in like a casino battle royal at AEW, and then
Seriously.
have him versus Jungle Boy in a knockout match.
Oh yeah, I could take that.
Well, let's hope it happens. I think he's deserving of something a little more of notoriety within the professional framework of the business, based off of what he's done, and he's got a hell of a story to tell because of that. You know, to battle your demons multiple times in life. You know, whether it's alcoholism, whether it's you know, the mountain to climb for self-respect. I mean, that is it is an endearing quality, and it makes for a good storyline. It makes for a good underdog redemption arc, and it's felt throughout this. I'm gonna summarize on my end real quick. You know, Arquette says of wrestling at one point, he says it's theater on steroids. And you know what? It's you know, when you milk and push that melodrama to that point, it becomes so serious that at the outset that you can maybe find a little bit of the silliness and the endearing qualities of it at the same time. And I think that perfectly explains Arquette. Arquette is like life on steroids. He is living to the fullest. He can't stop. Like he is just beaming life, beaming energy. He cannot turn that eternal, that almost Peter Pan syndrome, like, you know, off. Like he is very much of that variety. And so for him to funnel this and find a direction and purpose, especially after battling so much in his life on image, on expectation, on marital problems, on drinking, and then to become kind of a physical entity, you know, even with stents in his chest, even with depression, that's it's an impressive feat. And whether the film like distills that in its perfect quality, those are experiential differences to be had. I think the film, though, at its center, has the heart, has the direction, shows you what's valuable about this process. And for me, I found a lot to enjoy. Gentlemen, well, thank you for doing this, or thank you for allowing me to do this, I should say.
The takeover.
I guess you guys got something to promote for yourselves on your own channel? Anything coming up after this?
Yeah, we got some game reviews. We started doing those, so check those out for sure.
Yeah. We are doing a live, hopefully live Royal Rumble watch. Everyone gets a number, and we're gonna.
Can I just say, it's been a year, guys. It's been a year.
I know.
Can you believe that?
That's insane.
It feels like it's been 10. Like I was in a room with you all watching Royal Rumble a year ago, and it's that is baffling to me. So
thanks, Obama.
Zach, anything else going on the channel that the other two haven't mentioned?
No, not really. I just, if you guys don't mind, just because I thought of you guys during the second half of the film, you mentioned working with Peter Avalon. I thought you guys, when the ring was poorly put together in Backyard Wrestling, can you just go through all the stuff in the movie, anyone that you've worked with or that you've had contact with or putting rings together and stuff like that really quick?
Yeah, so me and him are in a group chat with Peter Avalon, the guy training him, and he has a whole bunch of guys there. And sometimes you get the message, hey, come set up a ring over here. Go to the show, like Championship of Hollywood. He wrestled RJ City. We set up a ring over there. Also, did one for Impact Wrestling. So Pete, Justin Calderon, photographer for Championship of Hollywood. Shout out for him for getting he got a credit in this movie. Brody King was in there also. He was one of the guys when Arquette fought Nick Gage. He was in there in that wrestling area. Who else did you see, Eric?
Also shout out to John Signorelli. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. He got a photographer credit as well. So it's cool he got that shine. Looking into the credits, there were a lot. I missed a lot of people. I must have phased out because there were a lot of wrestler credits in there. But pretty much, I think everyone in the Los Angeles local wrestling scene, I can't rename by name. Just
he did go to Santino Bros. There's a shot of there with his Tyler Bateman. Me and Eric also trained there.
That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, putting a ring together is no joke, man. And when you seen that backyard wrestling, immediately it caught my eye with how loose those ring ropes were. Like you have to tighten that up properly, man. That's no joke to play around with.
That's my biggest fear in pro wrestling is that the rope will come off when you're running it. Because if it does, they literally teach you to hook your arm when you do it.
Yeah.
And they tell you if it snaps, that's your only defense. Just hold on to that rope and pray to God.
And you're going for a bump.
Yeah. Somehow every single time without fail, and I know it's coming, whenever we set up the ring, I always somehow manage to smash my finger on the floorboards that go underneath it. So it's if you do a ring right, it's hard, it hurts, but it doesn't snap like that backyard shit.
Man. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for letting me host what is now officially an extra episode of I Know Movies and You Don't. And you know, if we want to say our goodbyes, we can say our goodbyes. And
Goodbye.
Goodbye. I want everyone to listen to West Coast Podcast. You're welcome to find my show. It's on Spotify, iTunes, Google, Amazon, Stitcher, Heart Radio, all those everything. I could go down the list.
Everywhere.
But it's everywhere.
Everywhere we're not.
It's everywhere. It's 3 episodes a week for the rest of my life at this moment. I just finished planning 24 official seasons plus extra content for Patreon. Wow. It's it's about 1,500 movies in the next 5-something years. That's the idea to talk about. So
that is very impressive.
It's and it's hard. It's hard to put in those seasons. It's hard to go which season does this one belong in? When do we talk about this movie? Because I could talk about so many movies in a heartbeat, and so I have to exude patience.
I bet. I haven't even planned the next episode yet, so I give you props.
Yeah, it's difficult. Well, all those people, thank you for joining I Know Movies and You Don't and West Coast Podcast. We hope to see you later.
Peace.